Slacker starts with the director speechifying from the backseat about quantum theory. That's one way to start a movie. In the case of Slacker, it's a very relevant way, as Slacker is a film about entanglement, quantum or otherwise, and the narrative implies an infinite series of paths we don't see. And that's the point of the movie. It follows its characters an insignificant fraction of the way through their lives, even only a small fraction through the day, only giving us windows into all these various worlds. Even still, the film feels as if it has a narrative. It feels as if all these random conversations all belong to one voice rather than to many. Even the title of the film, Slacker, singular, contributes to this sense. In that case, the flow of this film almost feels like a passing of the baton from one character to the next, from one conversation to another. But all of these conversations have one intent, all of the characters being masked to cover one face. I think this may be why it's so important to introduce the film with Linklater himself. After all, whose voice is the film expressed even if not the director's? Even though the monologues were more of a group effort between him and the actors, they were selected and approved based on his direction. And again, his conversation is the one that sets the tone, the one which introduces the theme of the film, one thread in life versus another. This transition in threads happens quickly. Interestingly, the next occurrence is among the most extreme set pieces in the entire film, almost as if to get it out of the way. In this way, the parameters are set as to just how wide the humanity portrayed here is going to get. Crazy enough to commit vehicular matricide, but not crazy enough to gel one's hair with peanut butter. The film tones it down considerably from this point going forward, but luckily not too much. It's a few baton passes on when we're introduced to this guy. The humor in this character comes across perfectly well visually, but it gets even funnier when he opens his mouth. He begins his conversation about conspiracies, which is normal enough, but he does so with excitement, almost as if he genuinely believes, based on no legitimate prompt at all, that he stumbled into one. His ability to somehow read into innocuous comments about a missing friend almost foreshadows his ability to read conspiracy theories into everything. Interestingly, many of his theories seem somewhat legitimate. I'm not going to mention which ones exactly. The importance in the scene, though, isn't in the conspiracy theories themselves. Slacker is not a movie about conspiracies. It's a movie about people and their world. Through this conversation, the larger world outside of Austin, Texas is given its avenue in, only in distorted and extreme form though. This is a running element of the film, though the things we're seeing here are parochial to the place and moment, namely Austin, Texas in the late 1980s. They're tinged by the outer world, history, politics, and pop culture, similar to the way the soldiers in Full Metal Jacket also become symbols of the world outside of Vietnam. Soon after is another strange scene. This one almost feels like it's out of Bergman or even Chris Marker. A character we never see is apparently missing. He leaves his room bare and empty with quote-unquote postcards sitting in the center as a way to tell a story. Here's another recurrent characteristic of people we're going to see going forward, namely pretentiousness. But luckily, Slacker, being an art house film, can only benefit from a little pretentiousness. The scene in particular is interesting because of how it breaks up the usual monologue structure seen elsewhere in this film, and even makes it a little more visual and impressionistic in a movie that's otherwise propelled through speech alone. The postcards are both theatrical but also a bit mystical in their feel. They tell a full story, but a full story abstracted, mirroring what the film does in general, or even what film as a medium does. Again, very Chris Marker-esque here. Because this involves the story of a character we never see, it again opens up our awareness of the world outside of what we see here on screen. This technique of hinting at an outer world continues when it comes to our next slacker, the famous as well as infamous Madonna girl. Not only does she give us a salacious story about a shooting, she also brings the world of celebrities into the discussion, including the private and intimate elements of celebrities. Again, the outer world exists, but it comes to our characters in the most strained fashion. They're not just looking out into the world from their little echo chamber. They're looking out into its most private and niche nooks. In this way, the schizophrenic woman we see not long after is only a slightly more extreme variation on the quote-unquote sane characters who populate the rest of the film's runtime. She's repetitive, incoherent, and speaks to an unresponsive audience, but which character here doesn't, really? References made to a distant beach in the next scene, an escape, a vacation from daily life, but one that means little to us. From our perspective, the whole movie is a vacation from our lives. We have no reason to follow these characters on their own vacation. The kids who walk around causing havoc give us a perspective outside of the usual college-age hipsters. They inhabit the world everyone else here does, except they encounter it without the understanding, but also without the responsibility. They lack in intelligence, but also lack in pretentiousness. They're among the few characters who express themselves through their actions rather than through exposition. The ritual with the jilted lover and the typewriter not only revolves around another totem in the film, but also expresses the idea of all women as well as of all disappointed men being one in the same, just different expressions of the same experience, which reverberates endless throughout history. This claim, like so many others throughout the film, mirrors the film's structure perfectly. The continuity in the experience of heartbreak is not too unlike the continuity in philosophical discussions from one scene and character to the next. We then get a much more basic and subdued argument between lovers. One of the small handfuls of dialogue moments to break up the constant monologuing. The minor conflict here gives the section a refreshing texture, which then segues into the scene with the JFK conspiracy theorist. Like the conspiracy theorist from earlier, this one is long-winded and obsessed, but his area of obsession is much more specific, and his effort to understand is much more extensive. The fact that his discussion centers around books, which themselves have innumerably more words than this film does, and that's saying quite a bit, centers the importance of the transferring of ideas. Questions regarding JFK survive to this day, not only because of books, but also because of discussions like the ones we're witnessing here. You could even take this a bit further for the modern era and bring in the internet's effect on the proliferation and spread of such conversations. Radical politics are referenced earlier in the film by the revolutionaries selling his shirts, but the movie takes a second moment to explore a more measured and academic anarchism in the form of the professor and his daughter. Not only does this character sympathize with the burglar, but he almost seems to use this burglar as a twisted reflection of his own angst against society. He talks about the changes he hopes to see in the society he hopes will collapse within his lifetime, only for his daughter to burst this balloon later. He never fought in the Spanish Civil War, but he uses the claim that he did not only to boost the seriousness of his politics in the eyes of the other, but also, maybe more likely, as a way to give himself meaning. This borderline sad revelation could be applied to many other characters here, whose discussions regarding the most serious of topics is more of a way to kill time or to puff themselves up in the eyes of other people. The section with the oblique strategy cards is fascinating, not only because it provides interesting characterization for the woman handing out these cards, but also because of the nature of the cards, which are supposed to break up monotonous behaviors and expectations that lead people to circular issues in their lives or ruts. This plays well with the action and discussions in the rest of the film. The movie is kind of nothing but obliqueness, yet at the same time we can't help but notice a tired repetition emerging from the need to be oblique in the first place, leading to a paradox where to be different is to be the same as everyone else, and where breaking habit is the habit. This is probably the greatest hypocrisy of the outsider lifestyle, and Austin, Texas, being the home of outsiders, can't help but become banal because of it, as strangely self-defeating as that is. The issue then of action lends itself well to the scene with the TV guy. His need to surround himself with a noisy multiplicity, all while he's locked away from the world, mirrors the experience of watching Slacker in the first place. While he turns his neck from one screen to the next, taking in various stories, the film does the same. Combined, these stories can be seen as random noise, at least if taken too literally. But if one is looking for it, they can easily find the through line which connects each story on the thematic level. Likewise, this character seems to also perceive all the various screens, all the various channels as adding up to some cohesive whole. Even more interesting than that though, he desires to be able to control the various moments of the world the same way he can as a TV viewer, the same way we can as the audience to this film. The real world is a place that consistently falls forward, leaving every previous moment behind itself. Yet, that which is captured on film, VHS, or digitally can live forever. Even the ephemeral nature of time, place, and the various conversations which echo off the buildings of one's place and age, all of that can be immortal as long as one dares to capture the moment. I wonder a little bit if this character here isn't more Linklater than the Linklater who greets us at the beginning of the film, and in some ways he's more thematically relevant. Though the absurd visual of the scene, which is more striking than almost anything else in the movie, makes it likely to be a good thing than that it appears so late in the film. If it was earlier, it would be a bit distracting. We see almost the mirror opposite of this character soon after though, in the van guy who takes the girls to the band show. Not only is his attitude very laid back and receptive towards everything, but even when faced with an obstacle to his plans, he transitions into the next thing just as easily. Unlike the TV guy, his goal isn't to control the moment, it's to live with it and to let that moment guide him. Just like we, as an audience, have to learn to do that while watching Slacker. We have no choice, we're along for the ride. The anti-art guy at the bar is possibly the only counter to the otherwise pretentious world the other characters inhabit. Even still though, he's not as truly free from the aura of Austin as he's trying to be. Even his anti-art stance feels a little bit performative. His anti-performance perspective feels artistic. His taste in films, name-dropping Antonioni's blow-up in casual conversation, betrays who he really is on the inside. He's just like everyone else in this world, except his hustle for uniqueness is to pretend that he isn't unique. Later, we see the old man walking down the street, speaking wise aphorisms into his tape recorder. His sentences are very punchy and self-contained, but they aren't without their wisdom. It's as if he's the endpoint that the more clever of these characters might reach upon getting to his age. Or maybe even like he's the concentrated wisdom of several lives. Like if you were to juice the every monologue in this film for the most nutritious moments, you'd be left with the contents of this man's tape. Again, the outer world of conflict is brought in again with the guy in his car advertising weapons while half the neighborhood is barely awake. The group which ends off the movie running around with Super 8 film end up being the perfect finisher for it all. Not only do they represent the freewheeling love of film and capturing the world, which is reflected in the film writ large, but they're also just another of a limitless number of stories, this one recorded just like the TV guy would have wanted. Even still though, they're living completely in the moment, so much so that they, without much pause, throw their camera off the hill. The visual of the camera spiraling is a perfect freeform dive into beauty for beauty's sake, for the capturing of the Dionysian moment with the Apollonian technology of film. It's a perfect visual metaphor for what Slacker is at its core. More than that, it's a perfect visual metaphor for Linklater's work at their core. And even more than that, a perfect visual metaphor for film and life itself, which is truly, beyond anything, what this film is actually about.